Welcome back to another episode of Freeform AI. My name is Michael Burke. I do data engineering and machine learning at Databricks. I'm joined by my co-host. His name is
And Wilson. I bother Egyptologists in my free time, and I also work at Databricks.
Today, we are going to be talking about writing books. Why, you might ask? Well, someone on LinkedIn reached out and said, "Hey, Michael, do you want to write a book?" And so I said, to myself, do I want to write a book? And then I thought deep into my Rolodex of friends and coworkers who have written books, and one of them is named Ben Wilson. So I slacked him and was like, "Yo, Ben, do I want to write a book?" And that's what we're going to flesh out today, whether I would like to write a book and with who and what the process looks like. So, Ben, taking a step back, you have written a book for O'Reilly, Manning?
Manning.
Manning. What was that book?
Very long. It was Machine Engineering Learning in Action. And no, I didn't pick that title.
Machine Learning Engineering Action.
In Action.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Machine Learning Engineering in Action. Yes.
Cool. Why did you write this book?
A LinkedIn outreach. Actually, it wasn't LinkedIn. It was an email that just popped in my personal email folder that was basically a cold call outreach from a development editor at Manning that said, "Hey, I'm not going to tell you who, but somebody recommended that you write a book." And I came to find out months later that that's a process that can happen if a Manning author knows somebody professionally who seems to be an expert in something, and they can recommend that, like, "Hey, reach out to this person. They might be pretty good for like this topic." And at the time, Manning was trying to flesh out more of its ML library. So there was a number of us that were all writing like ML related books for Manning at the same time. And now their catalog is much more robust with that. Historically, they'd been more like traditional software engineering type stuff. Like they have some foundational books that they published about like Java and Rust and Go and stuff. And the inaction series, they approached me about that. They're like, "Hey, we want a book like this, which is more a hands-on real world experience about a particular topic instead of theory and academic type stuff."
Got it. Yeah, so this is actually a really, really good resource. It's a required reading list for AIFDEs, or not required, but suggested. And we actually have a book club on it right now, slash it just ended. And I verbatim copy and pasted the workbook on my interview for Databricks for the machine learning section of the take-home assignment. And it went really well. I passed in flying colors. So there's lots of really interesting insights in there. It ranges from soft skills and like how to handle like discussions with stakeholders on making a valuable machine learning implementation. And it also gets really technical on things like Shapley values and how to properly visualize them so it's useful. And a lot of the taking the basic statistical concepts and adding flavor to them so they're actually useful in industry. So Ben, I'm curious, what was the process for developing this book? Were you like, I know what to write immediately, and then just started typing and sent it over and done? Was it iterative? How did the
No.
idea turn into a book?
So they had a framework of kind of the direction of where they wanted the book to go. But they left it up to me. They're like, "Hey, we're down for you to do the first phase of this, which is kind of testing the waters." And the testing of waters is both parties are testing the waters, which is the publisher wants to know, are you capable of writing something that they can work with, like that a development editor can work with? And also, are you like technical enough in this domain to not sound like a blowhard? As well as on the author side, testing the waters with regards to, is this really what I want to do? Is this interesting? And how much time is this going to actually consume of my life? So the testing the waters thing is, the first task is write chapter 1, like an intro chapter. It's not the actual introduction. It's just like chapter 1. And they tell you up front, they're like, "Hey, most of this is going to be throwaway. So just go with it. Like put thoughts down of like where you think the vision is going to be of the first part of the book." And the books, they have a very regimented way of structuring their book. and there's parts to it, and each part is intended to communicate a mini thesis. And they also have a lot of structure around what the layout of the book is going to be with regards to within each chapter and within each, actually like subsections within each book. So they have a format, a formula that they would want to stick to. Aside from that, you get free reign, like what you want to do. And their first requirement is like, hey, write chapter 1, give it to the development editor. They'll give you notes on like things that you should be thinking about for the second half of phase 1. And the second half of phase 1 is basically incorporate all of their notes into that first chapter, rewrite it to like match how they think the tech book should be written, and then write the first 3 chapters of the book, knowing that they're probably mostly throwaway, and also provide a table of contents for the book, like a rough table of contents.
And how do you pick the topic for these first chapters? So going through the table of contents, it talks about introduction to machine learning engineering, preparing for production, creating maintainable ML, and then developing production machine learning code. So that's the 3 key sections. And then within them, there's 7 to 3 chapters, depending upon the section. So on the first topics, did they tell you exactly what you needed to write, or how much creative liberty did you have?
100% creative liberty. They want you to write the book that you want to write. But before you start working, even on that first chapter, you have like a 2-hour meeting with the development editor where it's basically just brainstorming. And they'll ask you like, what do you think is missing? What do you think is not fully published? Or what do you think you can contribute to the knowledge of humanity? And like they go at that level. And you talk through it. And most of these development editors at Manning, I don't know about it at other places, but the guy I worked with, this was like his 300th book that he had worked on. And he had been at O'Reilly before. He was now at Manning. He had been at Manning for like 6 years or something. But this dude has seen stuff and worked with a lot of different people writing tech books. So he had very pointed questions that were very efficient about getting me to kind of solidify my own idea. It wasn't, hey, I think it should be about this. I don't think he ever said that. It was more like, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions that you might not want to answer right now, or that might make you have to sit and think for a couple of days, and then you'll get back to me with a revised answer. But here's a bunch of questions. And you go through it and it's like, all right, I appreciate the Socratic process. And by the end of that meeting, you kind of have a mental map of, okay, here's kind of what I think this book should be about. If you compare that state to some of the developmental milestones that happen, and they do like reviews of here's where we thought we were going, here's where we're going right now. And they tell you like by the end, the direction will change again. And the process of getting there is fascinating, but it ends up making like a better book, in my opinion.
That's super cool. Like, and what were some of the questions that were asked? They were like big humanity, like specifically for machine learning. Do you remember any of them?
He was asking stuff like, he's like, how is this any different than this other book? He's like, have you read this one? I'm like, I haven't read all of that, but I've read some of it, and I kind of knew a lot of the information that was in there, so I didn't feel like I needed to finish reading it. But that's not the book I want to write. He's like, okay, why? How is yours going to be different? I'm like, well, I don't think there's a lot of practical advice out there about what it's like to actually build this stuff in the real world. He's like, interesting. Why? I'm like, well, because it would require somebody who's been doing this, not in an academic setting, but like in a consulting setting, and who's been actually building stuff for real and has made a ton of mistakes and made a bunch of dumb decisions and then learned from them. He's like, okay, fascinating. Now tell me why it's unique. He's like, why doesn't everybody else write this book? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, come up with an answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, figure that out and you'll have a story to tell. I'm like, interesting. And he's like, he's like, tell me a little bit about some of the dumbest things you've ever done in this profession. And I started listing some stuff off. He's like, okay. And he was taking notes the whole time. So he shared his screen and it was just a bunch of, he wasn't like typing down what I was saying. He was basically doing chapter titles of all of these things and he was interpolating what the message could be from this. And we ended up coming up with like 50 of these sections. And then he's like, which of these aren't strong enough to survive? And we started like saying, okay, that one, maybe not. Okay, maybe not that one. And at the end, he's like, okay, like, we got 12 now. He's like, 6 of these are not going to make it. And you're going to add 12 more. He's like, you got 2 days, figure it out. And then he gave me that as homework. And then we met again. And I was like, okay, I think this is the narrative shape. And he just started asking more questions until I was revising it to a point where it seemed cohesive, although it was way bigger than it needed to be. I didn't know that at the time. He did. So they're just like pushing you towards thinking more broadly and about a cohesive product, about what is the theme that you're going for here? What's going to give the feel of this book what it is?
That makes sense. Okay. So lots of ideating back and forth. Was it a lot of work?
Early days, not that much. I was just generating content pretty quickly because I almost felt energized. I was like, this is so cool to be able to like write a book and work on this. And he kind of told me to pump the brakes a little bit on the enthusiasm. He's like, hey, just letting you know, chapter 1, you're going to be at like revision 27 before this is done. And he was wrong. It was revision 34. And that included 4 full rewrites of the first 3 chapters, like rewrite from scratch.
What did you get wrong on the first attempts? And what
Yes.
does wrong mean? Okay.
So there's different layers of feedback that you get, not just with your development editor. You're not just working with one person in isolation. While you're working on the next chapter or the next 2 chapters, and it's done in installment chunks. While you're doing that stuff, the previous chapters and individual chapters that are produced are sent to reviewers who are former Manning or current Manning authors. And they just critique the hell out of it. Some people are super nice. They're like, this is so good. Or like, I really like how you did this. And other people are like, this sucks. And this is why it sucks. And here's how you can fix it. And other people are like, yeah, it was okay. No notes. And you're like, okay, that's not helpful. So the goal of doing that incremental work and getting that feedback from people who don't know who you are, some of it's anonymized. So, and when you're receiving it, you have no idea who these people are. You just know that they're an author who have like done technical books before. And they also bring in sometimes some technical editors who are people who are usually retired tech people who just like really enjoy reading manuscripts and providing feedback. They'll go through and vet the actual math that you're using or the code. They'll bring in an expert as well to come in. If you have Python code or Java code or Scala or something in your book, they'll actually look at that and not just do a peer review. They'll copy that code and try to execute it. And if there's a bug or something, they will tell you. Or if there's like, hey, you forgot an import statement here, or this library is out of date now, or this version doesn't work, you need to put a note in the code about which version, like that type of stuff. But the big changes are incorporating the feedback that you get from early reviewers of each individual chapter, and then the bigger editorial reviews that happen when you're finished with a part. So a section of the book, like 6, 8 chapters, whatever, you take that as a whole as almost like a novella. And that's given to, I think, like 30 people. And you might get responses from 12 of them who will go through and tear it apart. And they're checking for stuff like flow between chapters. And does the theme still flow? Is the messaging clear? What's the point of this book? Like, people will have very interesting comments. And sometimes that will necessitate you saying, I actually don't think I need chapter 4. Like, it's just a distraction. Or I can take chapter 4, slice it in half, put it back, like put it in part 3 of the book as ancillary information. And then I'm going to move chapter 4 down, but also expand it out a little bit more to incorporate. So you're shuffling stuff around, but in the process of that, you're rewriting loads of it. Like, it could be a whole section of 12 full pages that you're just saying, okay, select all of this, delete. What do I really want to say here? How do I get it more concise? Or I'm being too concise here. How do I expand this out?
What are some things you learned about communication?
I think in the like before I was working on that, when I would write about technical topics, I was far too verbose and far too rambling. You know, from getting Slack messages from me at work that that's my default mode of conversation is just rambling bullshit, stream of
Your
consciousness
words,
stuff.
not mine.
It is the truth. But in book form, when I'm doing like formal communication, I think about how is this going to be interpreted by the person reading it? And can I be as clear as possible? If it's something that's important that needs to be explained, here's why we're doing this thing. And here's why we shouldn't do these other things. It helped me quite a bit on kind of codifying how to do that effectively because I was terrible at it before. I would over explain or just go off on tangents, and that confuses a reader. Like, where's he going with this?
What did it look like in your head prior, and what does it look like now? Is there like a clear through line with checkpoints along the way? Like, what did that shift look like mentally?
It originally was more like an ocean of topics I wanted to cover. And like, hey, as long as I mention all these things, it's good. And by the end, it's like, no, you have to tell a story. Even if it is a technical book, it's got to be what is the most important thing. And they tell you this as well while writing with Manning, at least. They're like, hey, some readers are never going to make it past chapter 5. So put all your good shit in the first 5 chapters. Some people are going to skip chapter 1 because they're like, it's intro stuff, don't care. Some people are just going to go to chapter 7 and then chapter 11 because they're interested in those topics. So you can't sacrifice quality along the way, except in like the final 4 chapters. Those can be more brief and more technical because some people just won't even get to that. But in the meatier sections where you're trying to convey what the most important part of the book is, make it a catchy title for the chapter, but also that intro's it's got to be in your tone. It's got to feel authentic, and whatever you think is most important, convey that in a way that you're making a statement, almost like here's my hypothesis, and then here's my brief explanation, and then paragraph by paragraph after that, or section by section through the chapter, you're expanding upon that so that it reads as almost a thesis defense. So they kind of force you into that, and I liked that when I learned it, like how to do that. So it was entertaining.
A couple of communication techniques that I have found to be very effective. I'm curious if they would work in this setting. One is analogies. I think that likening a topic to something that someone knows is a really easy way for someone to grok like 70-80% of the content. And then I also found that stories, I often just in first person, are a lot more compelling. So
Mm-hmm.
if even if it's not my story, I sometimes say it in first person and then at the end say, that was not my story. That was something I read in a textbook or something. Do you use either analogies or stories in your day to day communication? And do you think it would fit with that book?
I mean, you already know the answer to this. I'm all about analogies, particularly about complex technical topics. I think I've evolved a bit since I wrote the book. There's a little bit in the book about it, although it was toned down by request of the publisher, of some of the more joke filled analogies or just random absurdity. So you can take concepts that, like, the key is present something that seems completely unrelated and is mildly funny or is ridiculously funny as it might apply to a particular topic, and then through a narrative and a discussion of that underlying absurd context and how it relates to this technical topic that's very dry and most people don't really understand it, or they understand the academic aspect of it but not the, like, how does this apply, or when would I actually use this? Then, you know, giving that later on and having that click in their brain. You don't have to explain it, you just show it. And then people are like, wait a minute, that is like this. That's crazy. So I do that all the time. I do that in mentoring when I talk to people, trying to explain, like, why do we do this? Like, what is a race condition? You know, if you explain it in dry academic terms, maybe your audience will remember some aspect of it or they'll remember the definition. But if you explain it in some ridiculous context. Like, how does this apply to the Star Wars universe? People will remember that because it's
Mhm.
so absurd. So it becomes an information compression artifact, and that's valuable for writing technical books too. I've got images in there about dogs eating bowls of spaghetti. I've had people message me on LinkedIn. They're like, I actually understand this concept now, but every time I think about it, I think about dogs sitting around eating spaghetti. I'm like, you're welcome. That is living rent free in your head for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and they had to pay a measly $64.99 for it. Okay, cool. So we understand ideation, implementation a bit. What was the sort of the final, like after the last round of edits was cut? What does the final book publishing process look like?
Well, editing doesn't stop until it's ready for typesetting. So you go through and do the sort of the content edits of the flow of like what chapters go where and in what parts and how does the chapter read end to end. And once you get the manuscript in a way that you're like, okay, all the chapters are done for this phase, it then goes for a full technical review where they actually pay somebody who's proficient in whatever topic you're doing. I don't remember who the dude was that they got for mine, but it's some like PhD ML person, some professor somewhere. And they read through the book and had comments, left probably like 100 comments or something. Some of them were, hey, you might want to tighten up this explanation here. It's correct, but it might be misleading if you don't specify this. And then other ones were like, I don't know if this is the most effective way to do this. You might want to think about this instead. And I go and read about that. I'm like, you're right. Yeah, I'm going to change that. So that round of review is really useful. It was more like, make sure it's technically correct in this domain as much as possible. And then you have the code technical review, which every code snippet has to run and work throughout the entire book. And from mine, I put all sorts of diagrams and like, here's how to use matplotlib to do like a fancy diagram. Well, all that stuff had to be like revised a couple of times because I was like, if you install this older version, it's not going to work. Okay, I got to like fix that so it works on like this range of versions of this library. So that was unpleasant, but yeah, you get through all of that. You get all the code working. There's also a companion GitHub repo you have to provide for Manning books. So that's full functional for ML. I did it in like Jupyter notebooks, even though I didn't want to. They're like, you need to provide these so that your readers can like just run them. I'm like, okay. It's probably going to be painful for them to read, but okay. And you get through all of that, and then you start on the official editorial process, which is they bring in a publication editor who reads the entire manuscript without any context. So they're simulating what it would be like from a technical person just picking this up in a bookstore and reading it. And they leave a bunch of comments about readability and about tone and style. And you go in and generally accept most of their recommendations. With the caveat that with Manning, nobody provides you with text. So if they leave a comment, it's like a comment on a Google Doc. And it's not like, hey, replace this section with the following. They're not allowed to do that based on publisher rules. The author has to be the only one who writes every single word in that book. So they just provide you direction of like, here are my thoughts. And you can ignore it too. You can be like, I'm not doing that. It's entirely up to you. And the publisher will not fault you for that. They can strenuously recommend that you change something. But at the end of the day, once you sign the contract, it is your book and they treat it as such. But I accepted like 98% of their recommendations because all of them were really good. And after you get done with that, you work with a editor, which that is kind of like the world's greatest spell checker and like grammaticist. So they go through and will start highlighting places where like, this is a run-on sentence, break this into 3 sentences, or this paragraph is going on too long. You're introducing 3 concepts here. This is 3 separate paragraphs and make it flow properly. So they're doing just pure readability of the English language. And I don't think there was a single request from the lady that did mine that I didn't accept. Or like, just read what she said. And I was like, you are 100% correct. Let me rewrite this.
Hmm.
And then you get to a point where the author's final edits are done. It goes through another round of kind of faster like proofing of everything. And they get a couple other people to come and just read it. And these people can read very quickly, and
Hmm.
they'll do like multiple of these a day. So they're just like burning through it, speed reading effectively and picking out things. But that final round of review, I think grand total, I had like 15 additional comments, and it was all on stuff that I had edited. And that's what they're really paying attention to. And
How much time
after
did this
that's
take you?
done, it goes to typesetting. And typesetting is where somebody takes your document and puts it into the actual software that is used for sending to a printer. And they'll take all of your diagrams and have a professional like graphics artist redo them all. So you'll do it in whatever. I did some of mine in Adobe Illustrator. I did some other ones in ScalaDraw, and they just take all of those as references and they make them into the professional looking diagrams that are in the books. And all you have to do is just say like, yep, that's good. Or you messed up the arrow here. Like this is supposed to tie to this. They'll go in and fix that real quick. Those people are like really good at what they do. And anything you pull off of the internet, you have to have citations for. So it has to be like royalty free stuff. And there has to be a provenance train of where that came from. And if it's not free, they have to redo it from scratch.
Yeah, that tracks. How long did all this take you?
A year and a
So
half.
hours. How many hours?
Some weeks it would be like 30 hours a week.
30?
Towards the towards those points at the block parts of the manuscript where like, okay, part one's done, or I think it's done, and now I'm like halfway through part two. The part one reviews come back, and you realize, damn, I've got a lot of editing to do. So some of those weeks I was like 60 hours, like just fixing stuff. Or if I was unsatisfied. Like a bunch of people commented on like, oh, chapter 3 is not really working anymore because you're covering some of this in part 2, like the second chapter in there. Or I realized that I'm trying to change the messaging in part 2 a little bit. So part 1 needs to be rewritten in order to conform to the later on stuff. Yeah, it's just like more work you gotta put into it.
Got it. That sounds like absolute hell. I'm not gonna lie. How did it
That's
impact?
Manning though.
Yeah, fair. How did it impact your resume? Do you think it was like net beneficial on your reputability as a whatever your title is these days, AI FDE?
For me, probably completely irrelevant because I wrote it while I was at Databricks, and I'm still at Databricks. I think it's more of I didn't write it for me from a resume candy perspective. I think it is legit. Like you do get outreach from all sorts of people. I have hundreds and hundreds of like messages from LinkedIn and from personal email and stuff. People who have claimed like this is like so helpful for me getting started in this career, and I respond with like, that's why I wrote it. Like I didn't write it for me, I wrote it for you. And it was just like my way of giving back to an industry that helped me explore some cool caves of curiosity. So yeah, that's the big thing is like, why are you writing it? I think if your intentions to writing a tech book have some amount of, well, I want to get some street cred here and I want to be known and maybe it'll open up doors, it definitely will. Like people will see that and be like, oh, you wrote a book through publisher X, which is a respected publisher in this domain. You must actually know what you're talking about, sort of thing. People just assume that. So yeah, I'd say it is beneficial. I'm not interested in that. It's not why I wrote it. So
Second question, did you do it to get rich?
no, and you won't unless you're. I think you can make a living off of tech books if you have like probably 12 to 15 in the top 500 tech books. You would be able to live off of royalties. That would be probably you could probably make $10,000 to $20,000 a month if you were selling like that of tech books. I don't know anybody who does that. There are people that have made like pretty good money from tech books, but you would have to pump a bunch of them out in order to have recurring royalties to be at that level. Because tech books age out. There's not a huge market for them. That's one of the reasons why they're like 60 to 80 bucks a pop, because they don't produce, they don't publish, they don't print a lot of them because there's not enough demand for them. But there's certain metrics you can use for like how many did you sell of physical copies versus ebook copies about whether you're considered a profitable author. And if you hit that threshold, your publisher will reach out and be like, let us know when you want to write another one. If your book flops and it sells like 100 copies, they won't ask you that. Most tech books are like that though. They just don't sell that many copies. If you're in the realm of like, hey, you sold like 10,000 copies, then they want you to write another one. If you're in the realm of you sold 100,000 copies of a textbook, of like a tech related book, and there are books like that that get published that hit those levels, then they're going to be beating down your door to publish another one because they're making money off that.
Yeah, heard that makes a lot of sense.
But
Okay, cool.
royalties aren't that much. You do get an advance. It's okay. It doesn't, if you're working in this industry at the level that we are, you won't even really notice it in your bank account. It's not that much. It's nice. It's kind of a cool. I can invest this, or I can buy some toys for myself, or with me, I can go and buy 500 extra books from my library and 3 guitars and like toys. But yeah, it's not going to be like noticeable amount of money.
Okay, cool. I think we kind of did it top to bottom. Do you have any final thoughts before I summarize on the book publishing process?
Yeah, be very aware that every publisher is different. So the author experience is dramatically different between tech book publishing houses, as well as the reputational benefit of which publisher you go with. So there are two powerhouses in tech publishing that publish a lot of tech books, and that's O'Reilly and Manning. And O'Reilly is they're more author friendly, I guess you could say. So they put professional tech authors and editors at your disposal to help you through the process a lot more. So they're more interested in providing a conforming product to how they publish books. That's why you pick up an O'Reilly book, you can tell the author's voice in it a bit, but they all kind of are somewhat homogenous, and they're structured in a very similar way because they know that's what works for their business model, and they want to make sure that they're pushing out a consistent product that meets their brand reputation. Manning takes a completely different approach, which is we want the author's voice to be out there. We will help them make it the best version of their voice, but every word that is in that book was written by that author. Every single word. Like nobody else is allowed to touch it. They provide suggestions. Whereas O'Reilly is like, no, we're going to co-author it with you. So they'll rewrite sections for you if it sounds like garbled nonsense. Manning will be like, you will rewrite this because it sounds like garbled nonsense.
Heard. So it's just those top two, you would say?
I mean, there are other tech publishers out there, but for the, hey, we want to get an industry expert to write a book on this particular esoteric topic, like those are the two big ones that have the most amount of street cred.
Okay. Well, my final question for you then is, should I write a book?
My question back to you is, why do you want to write a book?
And my answer back to you is, after learning that it's 30 to 60 hours a week, I don't want to write a book anymore. But the interest was two pieces. One is resume, and then the other is clarifying thought. I feel like teaching as a method for learning is really effective for me personally. I've done it on my blog a lot. So that would be the angle. It would like force me to research and actually understand what I'm saying instead of brain vomiting like I do on this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, The resume effect would be there, definitely. And yeah, you will learn a topic deeply
Hmm.
because you're going to have to think through it and like, how do I formulate my ideas here? And by the time you rewrite something 20 times, you know it. Like you deeply know it and you can teach it very well. But a big part of the why, and I wouldn't say my perspective is ubiquitous among other Manning authors. I've talked to a bunch of them in the years since I've published. And I remember one of the guys I will not say his name, but he was kind of in the class of first time authors that was coming through when I was writing mine. And I did meet with him a couple of times. And I did like a proofread of the first section of his book. I was like, damn, this dude is so profane. It's actually kind of funny. Just so many curse words in his manuscript, but they were like intentional. But he was almost like attacking the audience about like calling people stupid. And I asked him, I was like, just how burned have you been by working as a software engineer in like this type of company that you work in? He's like, man, he's like, it's not the users that are stupid. He's like, but I mean, some of them are. They're like really stupid. But he's like, it's the kids that are coming out of college. They just don't know like what they're doing. And I remember asking him, like, dude, do you teach them? He's like, that's why I'm writing the fucking book, man. Like, okay. But do you teach them? Do you like provide instruction about what it is that you're expecting them to just absorb by observation instead of truly learning it? He's like, no, man, I'm not paid to do that. And I'm like, okay, cool. So you're writing this out of spite. He's like, you're goddamn right. I'm writing this out of spite. And I'm like, I guess that is a motivating factor. His book did fairly well too. I enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of funny, but it was a bit hostile.
Yeah.
So they allow you, like Manning will allow you to write a book like that.
Hmm. Heard. Okay, cool. Well, in summary, lots of really cool insights generally on the book publishing process, but some tangible tips on communication hopefully you can take away and leverage right after this episode. First is you have to tell a story. It sticks in people's brains better, and it's also, if you want them to get through your paragraph, it should be somewhat interesting. Prioritize good content for early chapters. People won't make it through the end of an entire post, so please try to have the content be front loaded. And also use analogies. It's a really great way to connect people's existing concepts to the concept you're trying to convey. Anything else?
Jokes don't hurt either. If
Jokes
you're
do not hurt.
naturally somebody who can make people laugh and you can do it through prose, include it. Like don't dampen your own personality. It reads better if somebody's like, all right, this dude might be a little crazy, but this is kind of fun.
Agreed. Cool. Well, until next time, it's been Michael Burke. I'm my co host.
Ben Wilson.
And have a good day, everyone.
We'll catch you next time.